the matchless love that I found in you. Undeniable.
Your question is an extremely poignant one. It's an extremely painful one. And it's unfortunately the kind of a question that at the beginning of an open forum somewhere, somebody can derail your entire talk if they can show you out to hold a different perspective to them on this particular issue. So however we approach it, we have to approach it with one assumption. And we have got to learn to live with our disagreements without having to be disagreeable.
Amen.
If we do not love each other, even with our deep-seated differences, we will never accomplish in getting the truth across. We'll only accomplish in showing what we believe and do so with some kind of dogmatism or even some hostility. I believe there are a couple of things that need to be answered in order to answer this question. So please, by the way, if any one of you has further questions on Islam or Islamics or whatever, I hope you'll talk to Andy. His PhD from London is on the origin of the Quran and brilliant in his dealing with actually all world religions. Really valuable asset to our team. There are two things that need to be answered in order to answer this question. Number one is this: what kind of culture do we want to be in America? We have to answer this question. Because if you're going to engage each other publicly with such volatile issues, then it's like throwing a flame into kerosene or oil or something. You're better off in private conversations around the table discussing these things. But if you're going to engage publicly in these matters that are so personally felt, then we have to answer one question: what kind of culture are we going to be in America? What do I mean by that? It'll take me a few moments to unpack this. Paul Tillich, the theologian, said basically in the relationship to morality and ethics, there are three kinds of cultures that he summarized. One was called theonomous, second heteronomous, third autonomous. What did he mean by that? A theonomous culture, theos, the word for God, nomos, the word for law, God's law. Theonomous cultures assume that God, however you define him as a supreme entity, has so poured the moral ethos into the human heart that it's a natural way for everybody to think in those terms. It just takes natural law and puts it into a transcendent moral category. And if there is a culture like that in this world, it would have to be India. Hinduism is based itself on a theonomous motif, that the value for the family, the value for one another, the protection of the animal kingdom, and all of this in vegetarianism, all of this comes about from what they would call a theonomous assumption. God's law is in my heart. I don't have to have it imposed upon me. It comes from within me, and I know it ultimately comes from him. So that's a theonomous culture. The second one is a heteronomous culture. A heteronomous culture is heteros meaning another, nomos meaning law, that there is another authority that brings its law to bear upon you. In secular terms, Marxism is a heteronomous culture. In religious terms, Islam is a heteronomous culture. With a handful of the few, the mullahs and the leaders, or the imams, or the ayatollahs, they will dictate the ethic for the masses. It is a heteronomy in action. And in Marxist ideology, they bring to you their values, their world system, over and above and against the individual. Theonomous, God's law in your heart, and it's all in sync. Heteronomous, a law enforced to you from above. Now, in America, they will not yield to either of the two. The stealth culture will not say, no, it's God's law in our heart. We don't want to go that route. Nor do they want a heteronomous culture where we are dictated to in what we want to do. We want an autonomous culture. Autos meaning self, nomos meaning law. We want to be a law unto ourselves. Now, if that's who we are, is the person who disagrees with me willing to give me my autonomy too? Or is the question given, and once you answer it, it's bait and switch, and all of a sudden my autonomy is taken away and a heteronomous attitude takes over, I am forced to comply with the other person's worldview. After just telling me that we are autonomous, all of a sudden the behavior becomes heteronomous. So until that question is answered, I don't know how we're ever going to get our way out of this place. Are we an autonomous culture? If so, dissenting views ought to be allowed with impunity. Why is it that if a Christian holds to the sacredness of sexuality, that he or she is seen as imposing that view? That is a view that we hold within ourselves. As I said to an ABC reporter who looked at me and stayed through the whole talk at Indiana University, at the end of it she said, how is it you are against, Christians are against racism, but all of a sudden they are prejudiced against this kind of sexual behavior and all? I said, you know, I find that interesting. I said, can you answer my question to me? We are against racial prejudice because race is something sacred. We do not violate a person's race. My ethnicity is sacred. I do not want to violate it. I said, for the same reason we make our decisions about life, because sexuality is sacred. I said, you now have to tell me how you treat race as sacred and desacralize sexuality. If you'll help me with that, we can go further in our conversation. And as we walked in, it was 11 o'clock at night, she looked at me and she said, you know, Ravi, I've never thought of it in those terms. So we have to have the first question answered, what kind of a culture do we want? Can we disagree and still allow the other person's view to be held with impunity? I believe for the sacredness of marriage and sexuality ought to be given that privilege. Secondly, most importantly, is this question. How do we answer the question on what marriage is, what sexuality is, why we honor our vows, and so on? How can we ever answer that if we've not answered one basic question? What does it mean to be human? We did a forum at Johns Hopkins on this subject. Francis Collins and I were the only Christian voices, the others were all different voices. I really believe this question that is facing us is a very serious one, because it's going to overturn 5,000 years of belief on what marriage is. Very serious one. G.K. Chesterton said, whenever you pull up a fence, always pause long enough to ask why it was put there in the first place. So we have to know what we're dealing with. And I don't know if we can ever answer that question. And if we answer these two, what kind of culture do we want? What do we do? What does it mean to be human? Once that question is answered to me from both sides of it, then I can tell you why our answer from the Christian worldview is what it is. Does this mean I stop loving the person who disagrees with me? No. Does it mean I don't want that person for a neighbor? No. I just want that person to return the compliment and allow me to hold to the sacredness of life and values and all that. And hopefully in the end, I have absolutely no doubt, truth will triumph and truth will win out. That's the way God has always worked.